Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. I hope you're having a nice week. You had a nice week. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Young Ralph is here. Great to see you, Young Ralph. We have Liam Vickerman. Great to see you, Liam. We have Stefan. Great to have you on. We also have the Mad Monk 33. Great to see you. Chatty Rat is here. Hope you're well. We also have Wolf Pet. Great to see you. We have also, let me see, Suzanne. Great to have you on, Suzanne. Hope you're well. Raven 1983 Witch, great to see you too. Daily Blase, hope you're well. Make sure to check out Daily Blase's YouTube channel. Von Nakanizer, great to have you on. Hope you're fine tonight. We have Ava, great to see you. Evelyn is here. We also have, let me see, Roseanne. How are you doing, Roseanne? We have also Hugh is here. Great to have you on. We have Killer. Thanks for moderating once again, Killer. And CGM is moderating too. Thank you both for coming on tonight. We have, let me see, who else have we got? Dave is here, Shirley is here, Hattie is on, hope you're well. Roisin, great to see you. Reagan Elite, hope you're well. Great to see you once again. We have 91 Leads, great to see you. Hope you're well tonight. Going through the list, who have we got? Try and name as many people as possible. Give a shout out. Kevin is here, Kevin Marsh. We have also Sir Larry the Cat, great to see you. Kevin Grant is on. Ronan, Anya McGreevy, great to see you. Asperger's Europe, and so many more. Rod is here. So I hope you're all very well. Unfortunately, can't say hello to everyone. We're up to 100, almost 100 viewers. So remember, guys, to smash the like button. It helps the stream a great deal. Actually, I want to start with this story first. The really worrying story here from... this is from Open Democracy. Asylum hotel won't let mom cook for her sickle child daughter. Of course, some of the hotels that asylum seekers are in have restrictions, like for safety reasons, they're claiming, so they don't allow people staying in the hotels to cook meals. They have to just take the ready prepared food instead. The asylum seeker mum of a toddler with sickle cell disease has been refused access to a microwave at her hotel, where staff instead give her jars of baby food that the 16-month-old refuses to eat. As a result, Mariam Aziz believes her daughter's development is slowed. Zara had only begun to crawl and suffered from digestive problems. Miriam and Zara have been living in a room in the Copthorne Hotel, London Gatwick, in Crawley, near Gatwick Airport, since January, while waiting the outcome of their asylum claim. Miriam has begged hostel staff to let her use the cooking facilities, because Zara needs more than baby food, which is given by the hotel. But staff have refused, meaning she often has to rely on breastfeeding, something she struggles to do because of her lack of nutritious food. So this is the problem with not providing sufficient resources. Just sticking people in hotels. Of course, you have these health issues. You also have mental health issues where, people need proper support. They can't just be stuck in a hotel for 24 hours a day. They need to be in a proper facility where they're actually able to get access to the support they need, be it nutritional support or it be mental health support. Now, fortunately, it doesn't seem to be any mothers are going to be put on the barge. It'll be mainly young men, but it's still not something positive. Of course, it's going to be extremely risky putting a lot of young men on this, up to 500 on this barge, the Bibi Stockholm. And the fire service has criticised this policy, saying that it's a risk to both the residents of the people on the barge and to firefighters if there was a fire to break out. It's extremely risky. And then once again, unfortunately, I don't see this story getting much traction because Suella Braverman just doesn't give a crap. She'd be happy to see people suffer, I'm afraid to say. Anyway, moving on, I just wanted to cover that story before we jumped into the other stuff. I'll talk a bit about Brexit tonight, talk a bit about Greenpeace, the Greenpeace protest. Political X, I don't know if he's on the stream tonight, but he may have something interesting about GB News and and Greenpeace, a sort of connection between Greenpeace and GB News. So it's in the pipeline, but I won't say too much more about that. I don't know if it'll happen, but hopefully it will. But he should release something about that. Don't the firefighters get to veto? Yeah, I think the firefighters, well, the fire service, if they don't sign off on a fire safety certificate, then this barge can't be used. Now, the Tories and their supporters in the media have already preempted this by saying that, well, the firefighting union is affiliated with the Labour Party, so this would be a political decision, which is a disgusting course of action, is a disgusting attack line on the firefighting service. Check if a building is safe. If they deem it unsafe, it's not a political decision. But of course, the likes of GB News and the Tories, even I think it was even a Tory minister, was it a Tory minister or at least Tory MP, was talking about how the fire service is affiliated with the Labour Party. I think it was the Deputy Prime Minister, actually, Oliver Dowden. Disgusting behaviour. This is undermining the fire service, suggesting that they're making political decisions when they're actually taking safety decisions based on public safety and their own safety of their members. Anyway, this other story here, Tories lose control of another council after by-election defeat. So this was something that flew a little bit under the radar. Continuing disastrous electoral streak at the local elections this year, the Conservative Party lost control of East Sussex County Council last night after losing a by-election to the Liberal Democrats. The contest took place in Meads Ward, located in Eastborough, and Lib Dem candidate Brett Wright beat Nicholas Taylor, office manager for Eastborough Tory MP Caroline Ansell, by 288 votes. Not a massive turnout, okay? So the final results were Brett Wright, Liberal Democrats, 1,649 votes, elected. Nicholas Taylor, Conservatives, 1,361. Labour, 157. And Claire Martin from the Greens on 127. Probably some tactical voting going on here to keep the Tories out. And that was, it's a small success, but it's a success nonetheless. Some of the highlights of today, of course, the private sector will be used to cut the vast NHS waiting lists. It'll be a crying shame not to use the private sector, the health minister has said. I'll come to that in a moment. London Mayor expands ULEZ scrappage scheme after by-election loss. I think that's a good decision by Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor. Minister slips up and says, when Labour gets into government, as she attacks ULEZ. Yeah, that was the health minister once again. It's like, when Labour get into power. No, it should be if Labour get into power, but they're not sending the smartest. Eddie Izzard launches fresh bid to be Labour candidate. That's to take over from the seat that's been vacated by Caroline Lucas from the Green Party. Now, I like Eddie Izzard, but I would prefer the Greens to hold this seat instead of Labour winning it, because there needs to be a Green presence in the House of Commons. So I prefer Eddie Izzard to go somewhere else and contest a seat somewhere else and leave this to the Greens. I understand the Labour Party, that's not their policy. The Labour Party's policy is to fight all seats, but I think they should step aside and allow the Green Party to hold on to that. I think it's Brighton. Hold on to that Brighton seat. What security does the Prime Minister have? So that's in relation to Greenpeace unveiling some black cloth over his house. One of his houses, not to say it's his own home. He has many homes. And of course he wasn't there, and the right wing have had a meltdown over it. Garrett, thanks so much for that super chat. Did you also hear about the companies tasked with assisting the government with their floating concentration cap receiving threatening letters? I did not hear about that. Thanks so much for that, Garrett. So it's threatening letters from whom? I know where I would like Eddie Izzard to go. Wolfpet, do the wee runs around about Scotland, and Jenny films most of it. We call it Aki's tour for a laugh. Despite being a unionist party, Labour does not run candidates in Northern Ireland. Yes, and the same with the Conservatives. Although the Conservatives do have a Conservative branch in in Northern Ireland, but I think if I ran in Northern Ireland, I'd pick up more votes than than the Conservative Party would, and that's not saying much. Richard Turner, thanks so much for that super chat. Izzard PMQs, Prime Minister, cake or death? Thanks, Richard. So it'd be interesting to know who the threatening letters are from. I made a video about an hour ago saying the royal family is a bit strange, like 1960s episode of the BBC's Watch with Mother. I must check that one out, so Hugh. Okay. So it's good that the Tories have lost that seat. When it comes to interest rates up, focus on savers and renters. The Bank of England has increased its base rate of interest by 1/4 of a percentage point to 5.25%, which is lower than some economists had predicted. On the Sky News Daily, Leah Boletto, speaks to our business correspondent Gupret Narwan about the decision to raise interest rates for the 14th time in a row. Plus, guys, okay, so it's just about a podcast there. This is, oh my goodness. Liz Truss would say a firm no to sensational "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here" whatever appearance. You may have read this week that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was approached by the producers of the popular ITV show "I'm a Celebrity" to appear in an upcoming season. Oh no, please, no. We saw enough with Matt Hancock. Please don't give these people any more energy. Don't give them any more oxygen. You know, we've heard, like, the best thing Boris Johnson could do is take his money, go on and live on a Caribbean island somewhere, drinking martinis from dawn till dusk, and then we never hear of him again. That's the best thing that Boris Johnson could do. And Liz Truss the same. Go and live on in the Cayman Islands or wherever, your ill-gotten gains have been squirreled away to. Just stay there, get wasted every day, do whatever you want on the beach, and just leave everyone else alone. You've done enough damage. The best thing you could do is just disappear into the ether. But unfortunately, they don't do that. They're like a sort of Nigel Farage rash. It just keeps coming up every 6 months, coming back every 6 months. She would crash the show. Well said, Sir Larry, yes. Johnson wouldn't work that cheap. Yes. 100,000 or 200,000, but no, he's not working for those sort of buttons. He gets more money, delivering a rant on on some American stage. Why do people give money to Boris Johnson? Why would anyone give money to hear Boris Johnson rant about Peppa Pig or something like that? Even worse, Liz Truss. People were paying her to speak. If it's how to destroy an economy, okay, it's a warning. Wait for Liz on Celebrity. Can we leave her there? Yes, that'd be the best solution. Brad, thanks so much for that super chat. Johnson would ace the Bush Tucker trial because he's tasted far worse things, mattresses, than animal parts. Or wasn't that what's his name? David Cameron. Wasn't it David Cameron that was messing about with animal parts at a university, was it? Or some sort of college he was at. Thanks so much, Brad. Garrett, thank you so much for that super chat. Letters sent to taxi firms, security company, the barge management firm, and Dorset Council threatening that collaborators will be followed home. Oh, okay, that's a bit worrying. So this is sort of understandable, not acceptable, of course, but it's understandable that you would have this sort of response from crazy people, because you have people on the left saying this is really concerning. You can't be putting asylum seekers into these barges. It's not safe. And then on the right, you have people in the area going, we don't want this barge here, and we're going to do everything we can to stop it. We don't want these Africans or Syrians or Eastern Europeans or whatever on this barge in our area. This is their response to this type of this measure. And they will fight it, and they will create a lot of trouble. We saw recently, well, not recently, it was about a year ago, where there were riots taking place outside a hotel hosting asylum seekers, where a police vehicle was damaged. And I think there were some injuries. Nobody was killed, thankfully, but, you know, the asylum seekers were in fear for their lives, because they were stuck inside this hotel where there was rioting going on outside, and they didn't know what the situation was. They didn't know whether they would be attacked or not. So you could imagine something like this getting quickly out of hand in Dorset, at Portland. Richard, thank you so much for that super chat. Would trust last longer than in the jungle than Prime Minister? It's a very good question, Richard. Would she last longer in the jungle than Prime Minister? Probably. I think it'd be about the same if she's doing really well. She of course she probably lasts it would be a record shortest time in the jungle for any contestant, I imagine. So whatever the shortest period of time is, she would break that record. Peter, thank you so much for that super chat. New program. I'm a Prime Minister. Get me out of here. This should be what Rishi Sunak should be doing. And I keep asking the question, why is Rishi Sunak Prime Minister? What does he get out of it? And I think that was sort of answered this week, where it appeared that... Hold on, I have a notification here I need to switch off. Apologies. This was sort of answered this week, where it seems that Rishi Sunak's father-in-law runs a company called Infosys, which it seems is still operating in Russia. I believe it's still operating in Russia. I could be wrong. I'll take it back if I'm wrong. There's been pressure on them to stop operating in Russia, as far as I know. But it seems they signed a contract with BP, British Petroleum. Now, I don't know if this is connected to him issuing more licenses to oil and gas companies to extract oil and gas in the North Sea. Could it be a case of, look, my father-in-law and my wife, who's benefiting from my father-in-law's company, have signed a $1.5 billion contract with BP, and BP extract oil and gas from the North Sea. So I don't know if these things are connected. They could be completely unconnected, but we'll have to wait and see for that. Rishi Sunak is Prime Minister because his racist party couldn't elect him until they chose a woman. Had to stand in lettuce, and finally conceded that they would allow one of those people to try the job. It allows them, like Suella Braverman, Suella Braverman can get away with things that a white Home Secretary couldn't. They'd be called racist. But it allows the Tories to do things that, would be criticised in another way if Suella Braverman had been white, for example. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. The letter warns, for the sake of your conscience, finances, families, pets, house and cars, do not in any way work on the barge or assist. My God. I wonder what sort of effect will this have. Will the companies pull out? Will they avoid working with working on this project, or will they see it as just an idle threat? I think the head of a company should take these threats seriously. because it could result in a member of staff being harmed, or their family member, or something connected to them in their something connected to their life, their pets, their house, their car, whatever. And the company would have to take not responsibility for this, but they would have to provide support for their staff, and they don't want to be involved in this. So it could have the effect, and this policy could eventually be dropped. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to stop the boats. It's not going to reduce the numbers of people waiting to have their asylum claim processed. It doesn't fix any problems. It just creates a distraction for the Tories. Thanks so much, Gareth, once again. It's a very interesting story. If after the stream, if you don't mind, maybe send me a link. I don't know if you read it from a website or what. It'd be interesting to know where this came from. Anyway, I just want to touch on that story about Eddie Izzard running as a Labour MP in Brighton. So it says here, comedian Eddie Izzard. So we have Mr. E. Thank you so much, Mr. E, for that super chat. I pay a super injunction gagging order on both Truss Johnson and all the Tories. Yes, that would be, yes, definitely for get me I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, or whatever it is, whatever it's called nowadays. Just no more. I don't want to hear anything more from Boris Johnson or Liz Truss. They've done more than enough damage. So it says here, thanks so much, Mr. E. Comedian Eddie Izzard launches bid to become Labour MP in Brighton. The Star is aiming to become Labour's candidate for Brighton Pavilion at the next general election, the seat of outgoing MP Caroline Lucas. The comedian is aiming to be selected, so he's not the candidate yet. He's hoping to become the Labour candidate, so that's not decided yet. To be selected as Labour candidate for the next general election, when the Green Party's only member of Parliament, Caroline Lucas, is standing down. It's a big disappointment that she is standing down. It would have been great for her to remain on, but she's been there since, I think, 2005, so she probably has enough of it. Gareth, once again, thanks so much, Gareth. And also now imagining Northern Ireland Tories as if they were some species of door-to-door salesman. Good afternoon, sir, madam. Could I interest you in joining in some union? Can you imagine the Conservative? Like, what would the Conservative message be in Northern Ireland? Because I'd love to know what the Conservative message in Scotland and Wales is. Like, we know it in England. What is the message the Scottish Tories sell the public? SNP bad, okay. But in Northern Ireland, what is it? Sinn Féin, no, well, we're not running against Sinn Féin. DUP, no, well, we're not running against the DUP. Who are we running against? Because give us a chance, that would be it. You know, give us one of your preference votes. You know, it could be whatever. Give us the crumbs. We can be the crumbs party. We'd be happy with just, you know, standing on the stage when the winner is read out. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. Good to see you on tonight. Right-wingers would say that it's acceptable protest, but sitting on the roof of the Prime Minister when he's not home is not. Yes, so it's an acceptable form of protest against the barge, but sitting on the roof of the Prime Minister's house is not. This is always the case with the right wing. They'll say, well, the protest that we support, you can protest in any way you want, but it's a protest we don't like, then you're not supposed to protest. Like they said, oh, people shouldn't be blocking the road. Okay, so just up oil, walk slowly. Then people are criticizing that. Then there are, you know, some of the protest. I don't agree, like, with covering up, you know, painting over art pieces or whatever. I understand that there's a piece of glass protecting them, but I think in some cases it may turn the public against you, but you want to have the public on board. And, you know, attacking politicians' buildings or attacking politicians in a non-violent way, of course, but not even attacking, just, exposing them for the charlatans that they are, I think is maybe the best form of protest. I said before, if it's members of the public, the best thing is to write to your MP. If enough people write to the MP, it puts pressure on the party to change direction. But no, I wouldn't support attacking anyone. Not attacking anyone. It has to be something about focusing on a position of power. So who is in charge? Rishi Sunak's in charge. The Greenpeace protest was very good because he wasn't there, his family wasn't there. They had checked beforehand. They had checked with the staff at the house, and the staff were like, yeah, okay, whatever, basically. Eddie Izzard can do one. Love from Scotland, Ruth. I don't know his relationship with Scotland, so I don't know what he said about Scotland. Thanks so much, Ruth, for that super chat. Northern Ireland Tories are better than the better. Okay, are you sure you have the better than symbol the right way around there? Thanks much, Gareth. Maybe non-existent. Alistair, thank you so much for that super chat. Tories, Labour in Scotland, SNP bad. That's all they have, Max. Nothing else. When you see some of them working together, you have the Tories and the Labour Party working together in Scotland. It's a bit worrying because it's supposed to be getting the Tories out. But if they say, well, we're not getting the Tories out in Scotland because the Tories are not in power, we want the SNP out and we're willing to work with the Tories, then at least come out and say that. Don't pretend that you're not doing that. At least come out and say, yeah, we're the Labour Party in Scotland. We want the SNP out and we're willing to work with the Tories to do that. Because for us, it's more important to get the Progressive Party out, and that's it. It's just to get to give them a bloody nose. Please mention Broadcasting Scotland. Yes, guys, make sure, maybe some of the moderators can post a link to Broadcasting Scotland in the chat. It's a small channel that needs your support. If you can subscribe to that, it's put out some very, very good content, independent media content. Check that out. Thanks so much, Alexis. Anyway, so it says here, Izzard, who goes by the name of Susie, announced the move in a video post on social media in which she touted her East Sussex roots and love for open-minded and welcoming city. The open-minded and welcoming city. She criticised the government, the Tories, Conservatives, for trying to drag us down, as well as the Green Party leadership in Brighton, under which she said house building stalled, was rubbish piled high in the streets. In a further dig at the Green Party, Izzard said, "It will take practical action, not protest, to fix what's broken," adding that she can inspire many thousands to become our friends and allies in the fight for a fairer, greener, cleaner planet. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the constituency. I'm not familiar with the council. I find it difficult to believe that the Greens would be indifferent to the environment in that constituency and the council. So, although the Greens have been making a lot of progress over the last number of years and turning a number of councils green, but when it comes to the House of Commons, they only have one MP, and I think still it would be a good idea for them to hold on to that constituency. Miss Lucas, 62. 62. My goodness. What's Therese Coffey is like 50. Really? Therese Coffey is something like 50 years old. Okay, this isn't a recent photo. This is probably from, about 10 years ago. But Caroline Lucas looked really well for 62. My goodness. Anyway, I like Eddie Izzard. I don't know everything about Eddie Izzard. I like Eddie, but I prefer the seat to be left to the Greens to fight, to hold on to fight just the Tories with it. There should be tactical voting to keep the Green Party there. Like, if Labour are going to win a massive majority, at least let Brighton stay with Greens. Is Gordon Ross okay, by the way, if anyone knows? Seen that the car was badly... Oh no, my goodness, I hope he's okay. Gordon Ross, who does his YouTube videos from his car, so I hope he's fine. Moving on. There's a Brexit story here. Never get away from Brexit. So it says here, economist and former Bank of England member of the committee. I forget. Member of the committee, who's the policy committee, I think it is. Charles Goodhart on Hunt's low growth trap excuse, and then, well, let's hear what he had to say. So, former member of the Monetary Policy Committee, former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee.
Some are saying that they're concerned that people's spending ability is already being squeezed hugely, and the full impacts of previous interest rates perhaps haven't even been felt yet, and there's a worry that it could slow the economy down. Is that something that worries you at all?
Well, the economy has to slow down in order to try and make the labour market less tight and bring the rate of wage growth down to a level that is consistent with the inflation target and with the low inflation.
So wages have to go down in order to match the inflation target. But wages are not driving inflation. This is what's worrying. So there's always this constant thing about, well, we need to bring down wages because wages are driving inflation. But wages didn't rise last year. So how can wages, in the public sector, wages did not rise last year. In some cases, they went down. So they can't be blamed for the rise in inflation. What's driving inflation is partly Brexit, but of course, energy prices.
So I know it's unpleasant, but it's got to be done. And with any luck, we can get through without a recession.
Well, yes, and Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has said that Britain is stuck in a low-growth trap. Is that how you see it, and is there a way out of it?
Well, I think the word trap is unfortunate because it implies that somebody else did it, and it implies there's an easy way out or a way out. And I think neither of those are strictly true. Everyone in the world in the advanced economies are facing low growth, partly because of demographic problems, partly because of the row with China and Russia. We are perhaps worse, but it's slightly self-inflicted. Remember, Brexit had the adverse economic effects that many economists, including me, always thought it would have.
It's not a case of, I told you so. But what's really worrying is that both the Labour, well, to a lesser extent the Labour Party, but the Conservatives in particular, continue to refuse to accept that Brexit has any impact at all. And Jeremy Hunt this morning was saying about how it has nothing to do with Brexit. Or yesterday, when he was interviewed by Channel 4 News. No, nothing to do with Brexit. He was, you keep asking me about Brexit. And once again, he was a Remainer. He believed that it would be a bad idea for the UK to leave the European Union. So, what convinced him that Brexit was a good idea? I don't think anything convinced him. It's just he understands that if he wants to further his career, he has to support Brexit. It's the Tory way now. There are a few outliers, but they're not really going to be in positions of power. Or they're not going to further their careers anymore. Number 3, 2 months as a member, that's great. A blatant plug, I did a video on UBI and modern monetary theory recently. There'll be a follow-up soon, so check that out. If you want to try and post the link, I don't know, you may not be able to post the link, but do check out Number 3's YouTube channel if he can't post the link, but do check out his channel, and I'd love to see it myself, and maybe we can do a collaboration on UBI. Yay, UBI! We're both. I imagine we're both fans of UBI, so it will be an interesting discussion. Guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I'm going to take a short comedy moment, and then we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff. Take care. Hope you enjoy. What did I say? Take care.
Welcome to Broken News. New laws come into force today that mean people who use their mobile on speakerphone setting in a public place can be shot on sight. The radical new law was rushed through Parliament in an unprecedented move to crack down on morons and twats. Our reporter has more.
TV show The Apprentice has a lot to answer for. As well as giving a platform to cranky, crinkly, cockney walnut Alan Sugar, it also featured arseholes using the hands-free setting on their phone for seemingly no reason. But whether on the back of a bus, in the quiet coach of the early train to London, or at the funeral of an old man who died in a fire, these no-hand nuisances will get their comeuppance from today. New legislation now gives police powers to immediately execute anyone seen conducting a call in public on their speakerphone. The ruling also allows lethal action to be taken if a business wanker speaks loudly into a large Bluetooth headset about some bullshit deal or something in a pret-a-manger, and if anyone plays music out of their phone speaker. It adds, if you must play music in public, at least have the decency to use a Bang & Olufsen Beosound A5 with 360-degree sound dispersion, or at least something with a better bass response than a potato. Opponents have called the laws draconian and over the top, but it's been confirmed today that they can fuck off. Back to you.
What a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Alistair, 6 months. Wow, that was quick. Time flies. That's wow, 6 months, Alistair. Amazing. It is. Time has flown. Well done. Brad, thank you so much for that super chat. The Bank of England tells us not to accept pay rises is ironic considering it's headed by a fatso on 500,000 a year. Yeah, what's his name? Andrew Bailey. Andrew Bailey is on about £500,000 a year. That's probably that's just his salary. Surely he has investments and stuff like that, and property portfolios perhaps as well. So he's on more than £500,000 a year, and it's easy for him to turn around and say to people, "Hey, you need to tighten your belt, cut back on those lattes, cut back on that Netflix. We have to prepare for a recession." A manufactured recession. So let's move on. Sticking with the economy.
Gurpreet, good to see you. So here we are then, 0.25% increase from the Bank of England. Were we expecting this?
Yeah, so the headline figure is 5.25%. It's a 0.25 percentage point increase from the Bank of England today. It was widely expected from economists. So most economists were penciling in this increase. There were no major shocks. It now marks the 14th consecutive interest rate rise since December 2021, when the bank first started raising interest rates from a record low of 0.1%.
So what's been the reaction? Because Labour will say, actually, it was the Conservative government that, I suppose, accelerated with their mini budget the hard times that people are experiencing now.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of causes of inflation that all interact. The major one, and the kind of the biggest issue that we had to start with, was imported inflation. So it was the energy crisis, it was the war in Ukraine that triggered a massive spike in gas prices, and we're really vulnerable to that in the UK because we use a lot of gas to heat our homes. We've also had a huge increase in food price inflation. We've had supply chain bottlenecks all over the world that have affected our food supply. Brexit has played a part in it, and the effect that it's had on the value of the pound. So that's one side of it. But then, I know I'm getting really into what's causing inflation, but then there are also other issues at play. In Britain, we have a really tight labour market at the moment. During the pandemic, lots of people left the world of work. And when our labour market shrinks in the way it has, that puts lots of pressure on wages. And when wages are rising in the economy, that can fuel inflation even higher. It's something the Bank of England is keeping a really close eye on. So a lot of different things involved here, all fueling inflation in the economy.
It's a big...
But then what's going to happen is, as the economy starts to, contracts and a recession starts, there are going to be fewer jobs available. It's going to contract. It's going to reduce the bargaining power of workers, and then they're going to have to accept either pay freezes or pay reductions during a cost of living crisis. So you're going to have inflation driving up prices, and people having to accept pay freezes or pay reductions. And unfortunately, even if the government were replaced tomorrow, I don't think there's much that the Labour Party can do about this. In some ways, I think the Labour Party are going to take over a poisoned chalice. You have Brexit problems, you have these problems with trade, you have these problems with energy prices, a whole range of issues that need to be resolved. And Labour are going to struggle for the first 100 days, I believe. First few months is going to be very difficult, and you're going to have the Tories on the sidelines saying, "Oh look, people need to vote for us. We would have fixed these problems." A bit like Boris Johnson. As soon as Boris Johnson was kicked out or resigned in a sense, he was on the sidelines saying, if I was in charge, you'd be winning these seats. If I was in charge, I'd be fixing these problems. If I was in charge, we'd be taking advantage of these Brexit benefits. Thanks so much, Alistair, for those memberships. We have one for Gareth. Yay! We have one for Rick, Mithril, Etaneleza, Lesha, and Jerdmac. And that's it. Yay! So whatever happens, the Labour Party are going to struggle, I think. They're going to take over basically a shit show, and there's not much they can do. Their hands are tied because they can't really borrow to sort out this, because it's going to be very expensive to borrow. Gills are at a very high rate at the moment. Unless they raise taxes on the richest in society, this would be the best way to go. Take money from people who have it. Don't put pressure on people who don't have any money. But we're still about at least a year away, so unfortunately things are going to get much worse before they get better. Now I think the Tories are hoping that things will get better and then they'll be able to cling on to power, but it doesn't look like it's going to work. Maybe they're hoping that there's a chance. At the moment they have no chance, but they're hoping that, well, if we wait long enough, a chance will come along, but that's unlikely to happen. So when it comes to the NHS, the UK had, England in particular, the UK as in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the NHS was the envy of the world. And that sort of changed back in 2010 when the Tories took over. And what did the Tories do? They began the systematic, well, it had begun under Blair, but the privatisation of the NHS. In a sense, you could say it happened even before that, but the Tories really put booster rockets under it. But what they did was they also underfunded the service so that the private sector would be more relied upon. And now they're just coming out and saying, yeah, we need to rely on the private sector. So government turns to private sector in an attempt to cut NHS waiting lists. Oh, God. So the government is starting, 13 new continuity diagnostic centres will be opened across England to carry out an additional 742,000 scans, checks and tests per year. 8 of the new facilities will be operated by the private sector, but despite this, all services will remain free to patients. Yes, so this is how it starts, but this is not how it ends. So it will start off as the public sector is paying the private sector to do the work. And then gradually more of the private sector will eat its way into the public sector. So you'll end up with a system where almost at the end it will be a case of the public sector is paying the private sector to do the work, and the public sector is basically providing no service. Then it's very easy for the private sector to say, well, actually we'll provide these other services and we're going to charge for them, but we're going to use the facilities that we've already rented in a sense from the public sector. So you're going to have the hospital services that are owned by the state at the moment. They're public hospitals. They will eventually become private hospitals. And you're going to end up with something like the United States, where you have community hospitals providing free healthcare, but they're basically run by charities, a bit like food banks. We've seen a massive number of food banks spring up all over the United Kingdom over the last 13 years. an explosion in food banks. What do food banks do? They provide food for people who are not getting enough support from the state. Now, I hope when Labour take over, the number of food banks dramatically drops. That they will properly fund the social safety net so that people don't need to rely on food banks. Hopefully we're going to see food banks closing, disappearing, becoming a footnote in history. Let's hope that happens. But what we're going to see as well in the NHS is that you're going to see it move from a service provided by the public to a service provided by charities. And that's what you have in the United States. People don't have health insurance. They can't afford health insurance. If they have an accident, they're not covered. In many cases, they go to a community hospital. And you don't really want to be going to a community hospital because they don't have the resources that a privately funded hospital has. And this is really worrying. Like we're hearing stories about people pulling their own teeth because they can't get a dental appointment. Now, they can't get an NHS dental appointment. That's the public one. If you want to pay, you can get a dentist appointment, or pretty quickly you can, if you're willing to pay. But if you don't have the money, then you're going to have to take second best. And in some cases, there is no second best. So you have situations where people pull their own teeth. And then what happens is then you end up having to go to hospital and putting stress on the system. Small history lesson, Max. The privatisation of the NHS began under Thatcher, putting NHS catering and cleaning contracts out to tender in the 1980s and 90s. Thanks so much, Gareth. I had a feeling it had started well before Blair, but I didn't know it had begun that soon, that early, that far back, I should say. More food banks than McDonald's, 5,000 plus. Thanks so much, Gareth and Alistair, for those super chats. The DWP take almost everyone to court. Yeah, if you have a problem with the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, they'll take you to court for almost nothing, hoping that you'll just drop, that you'll just give up. And then if you do win, then they'll compensate you for just what you were supposed to get, but you're not going to get any massive amount of compensation. But it's a waste of money, waste of public money, taking people to court. If Therese Coffey, who used to be the Secretary of State, or Mel Stripe is now Stripe, whatever his surname is, if he had to put his hand in his pocket and pay the legal fees, I can guarantee you that the DWP would not be taking people to court. They would be settling straight away. The DWP, I believe, is a criminal organization. It's not there to help people, it's there to punish people. It's there to force people into doing jobs that they can't do just to bring down numbers. It is a criminal. I've deemed it a criminal organization. Jared Mack, hi all. Thanks for the gifted membership to whoever sent it. Thank you, whoever. I think it was Alistair. Great to have you on board. David McGuinness, check out Indie Truck Davies, the Two Davies channel on YouTube. Davies says, the Tory message in Scotland is to shut up, Jock, back in your box. Back to shining my boots. That's it. You're the colony. Back to whatever the colonists does. Yeah, it is a way of looking down on the Scots, and I don't understand why people vote Tory in Scotland. You know, what do they get out of it? Anyway, continue with the story. Sunak has made NHS waiting list one of his 5 priorities to the public in a speech given in January, but last month he said industrial action in the health service had made his mission more challenging. Analysis by Sky News carried out in May found that the number of people waiting for more than a year for hospital treatment is 186 times higher than before the pandemic began. At the end of February, 300,000 people in England had been waiting for more than a year since being referred to by a consultant. 2 years ago, In February 2020, the figure was below 2,000. Jesus. From 300,000 before it was 2,000. Now, of course, there was the pandemic, and that created a lot of problems. But since the pandemic ended, in a sense, that number has been going up, not coming down. 300,000 compared to 2,000. I think I have a graph here somewhere. Let me see if I can bring it up. Here we go. I don't know if Sky News already covered it. Probably not. Okay. This is, I don't know if you guys can see it. It's a little bit small, but it shows on the bottom the years from 1949 to 2021. And the numbers on waiting list from 1 million up to 7 million. And you can see 18 weeks from a referral for a GP to treatment. We're talking over 6 million people. Yes, it increased during the financial crisis, but then it decreased before 2010. And then when the Tories took over, of course, it gradually, dramatically in a sense, increased. But compare it to, the Blair government, when Blair took over in 1997, it was gradually increasing, but they brought it down. Alcatraz, Max, or Alpafornia. More like Alcatraz, I think. At least if Alpafornia might have the nice weather. No offense to Scotland. But you, in the sense that you can check out, but you can't leave. But in Alcatraz, there is no checking out at all. I don't know which is worse. One is a false hope. The other is just no hope at all. But this idea of focusing on the private sector is not going to fix this. It's going to just cost the NHS more. Somebody's going to profit out of it. Of course, the private sector is going to profit, and the public are going to end up with a worse service. At the end of February, junior doctors are currently preparing for another 4-day strike beginning the 11th of August, with consultants set to walk out for 48 hours from the 24th of August on the ongoing dispute with the government over pay and working conditions. Health Secretary Steve Barclay said, "We must use every available resource to deliver life-saving checks to ease pressure on the NHS. By making use of available capacity in the independent sector and enabling patients to access this diagnostic capacity free at the point of need, we can offer patients a wider range of venues to receive treatment, and in doing so, diagnose major illnesses quicker and start treatment sooner." This is, unfortunately, the strike action. So the junior doctors are on strike over pay and conditions. And instead of actually listening to the junior doctors, trying to work out something with them, what are the government doing? They're relying on the private sector. So they actually see this as a victory. Great. They're going on strike. We're going to demonize them in the media. And then here is our solution, the private sector. And we're going to say it's free. It will be paid for eventually. It means that the NHS has, like the NHS budget, this will come out of the NHS budget. So, yes, it will be free. You won't pay now, but you will pay later on, because the NHS budget is not being increased to cater for this. So this is different from, okay, we're going to rely on the private sector, so we're going to give more funding to get over this bump in the road. And unfortunately, West Streeting is using the same sort of language. Yeah, we're going to rely on the private sector just to resolve this problem. But it becomes a drug. It becomes a dependence where you depend on the private sector then, and then you don't go back to using the public, investing in the public sector, because it makes it easier. Because it requires political effort, it requires funding, it requires making difficult decisions if you want to reinvest in the NHS. It's much easier. Politically easier to just say, let's rely on the private sector. But it's detrimental to society. And unfortunately, I think a big part of this problem is that you have governments that focus only on a 5-year window, 4 or 5 year window. Okay, this is when we're in power. Like we have our honeymoon period, and then we're in power. And then what we want to just focus on is this. I think this is the general thinking today. Wasn't always the case. There was this, okay, we need to invest in the future. We need to invest in education. You know, the children we're educating now, they are future workers, future bosses, future doctors, nurses, whatever. That's gone. It seems to be just, okay, how do we resolve the problem of today? And to hell with the future. To hell with tomorrow. Gareth says, is that graph the NHS or the asylum backlog? It works in both ways. Well said, Gareth. It could be either way. As Billy Connolly once said, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just you're wearing the wrong clothes. Well said, yes. But it is really worrying that the NHS is going to be, it's going to get smaller and smaller. And we would hope that the Labour Party would say, no, let's stop that. Let's bring it back. Let's nationalise it. But I have a fear that they're going to rely on the private sector as well. There are countries in Europe where you have the private sector, but it's highly regulated. The private sector is controlled. But under a Tory government, they're just going to outsource everything to the private sector. And of course, the private sector is going to cut corners. They're going to focus on profit and not on public service. And that's where you're going to read horror stories in the future, I'm afraid. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. How many Tories have shares in private medical companies? I imagine a lot of them do. They either have shares in these private companies, or they're waiting to have a job on the board, having a job on as a member of the board of some of these companies, or working as a lobbyist, a consultant for these companies when they leave office. Give me a big fat donation when I'm, running as an MP or when I'm getting into power, and then I'll pay you back with contracts, or I'll make sure that you win. That you're given the best, there isn't a tendering process, you get the contract or whatever. And now that the UK is outside the European Union, a lot of the controls and mechanisms that came along with the European Union in regards to contracts and tendering processes are out the window. So a lot of the protections for the consumer, for the taxpayer, have been removed. Governments could always get around them, but at least there was some sort of oversight. Now you're going to have to rely on, open democracy or byline times to report these things. It shouldn't be happening in the first place. So, government minister actually talked about privatisation here.
It has definitely made a difference with our use of we have increased the use of the independent sector by a third since 2021, and they're delivering about 90,000 appointments every day. And the independent sector has got capacity, and we are using it to the best advantage for patients, because
it's not for patients. It's not to the best advantage of patients. It's the best advantage for you. The private sector is not there to care for patients. The private sector is there to make a profit. What you're going to end up with the system is you're going to have people who are costly to treat will be left with the public sector. The people who are cheap to treat will be sent to the private sector, and then they'll be fleeced. The taxpayer is going to be fleeced. So the taxpayer is going to take the heavy cost of social care and stuff like this. That's going to be relying on you're going to rely on the private sector somewhat, but this is going to where it's very expensive to treat people. This will be left with the public sector, but where they can maximize profit, these patients will be sent to the private sector. To buy a Tory MP to £2,000 to £10,000 gets billions in contracts. Yes. Maybe Tory MPs are actually cheaper now because they're not in fashion. It's the opposite of capitalism. They're not all that they're not all, well, no, in a sense, no, it is capitalism. They're not in demand, so the price drops. So I think you could actually get a Tory MP just before, they lose power. You can get them pretty cheaply. After the election, they'll be paying you to take them on board. Thanks so much, Alistair.
There still be NHS patients, it's still NHS care, still free at the point of use. But if there is capacity, it makes sense to take pressure off NHS services by using that, whether that's buildings, whether that's staff, or whether that's
But that's a failure. That's pointing to a failure. We have failed. Now we have to rely on the private sector. There's no other way you can describe it. There's no other way you can cut it. We have failed. Now it's the private sector have to pick up the slack. And I really wish journalists would point that out and say, okay, so you have failed. Why are you relying on the private sector if you are doing the right job, if you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing?
Equipment.
Can you foresee a day, a time when this sort of private sector involvement will be withdrawn again, perhaps when waiting lists come down, or are they here to stay?
Well, certainly we haven't invested in so many of them to withdraw them. But
so we haven't invested in them to withdraw them. So they're here to stay. We're actually going to expand. We're going to get to a stage where nothing will be provided by the NHS. It will all be provided by the private sector.
The community diagnostic centres, as I said, there's 114 of them. The vast majority, there's only 4 that are independently run at the moment. The 13 that we're announcing today, 8 of those are independent. So the vast majority will still be run by the NHS, but it's about a partnership arrangement. We want to get people seen as quickly as possible. And where there is capacity in the independent sector, then we'll use it. But it's not the first time. I've got many patients who've had surgery at hospitals such as the Nuffield or Horder. And again, they've had very positive experiences still as NHS patients, but being treated in the independent sector.
I've said it before. It will be about talking up the private sector, saying how the sector done a wonderful job. Do you remember during the pandemic, they were saying how, they were almost kissing the feet of AstraZeneca, the company producing the vaccine, saying they could give them a pat on the back. They were doing it as a business. They were not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They saw an opportunity to make a lot of money. Now, in some ways, they don't always sell it off at a profit, but they recoup the costs in some other way. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. In England, money flows the patient, not the NHS. Follows the patient, not the NHS. They aren't NHS patients. They're private patients paid by the NHS funding. It's using the NHS to launder money to private companies. Yes, it's not about. It's funneling money. The taxpayer funds money to the NHS, and that goes directly to the private sector. In a way, it's a type of money laundering. They're not, as Magic said, they're not NHS patients. They're private patients, and this can only last so long. It will get to a stage where people will have to pay. You'll have to, and you have people like Nigel Farage, who seems to be the tail wagging the dog at the moment. I really hope he doesn't start talking about the NHS. But it's about convincing people that, the solution is to go down the American route. We're spending too much per capita on the NHS. The US spends more, but it gets worse outcomes because the money is funneled into the private sector. But they'll say the NHS is broken, we need to go with the private model. And then they'll cite examples around Europe where they're not being honest. They're not talking about how it's controlled, it's strictly controlled, how private companies are not able to do whatever they want. But they will say that we should bring on board the private sector. They were worshipping the private sector during the pandemic. And now it's, okay, now let's go with them. They're going to fix all our problems. They're the panacea. The free market is the panacea. And that's the way they want to go. They want to go down the road of private healthcare insurance, like the United States, where people become bankrupt, go bankrupt. The highest, the biggest reason for bankruptcy in the US is health-related problems. Medical bankruptcy doesn't exist in Europe. It's a big problem in the United States, where people are selling their homes, getting into debt to pay medical bills. And it could happen to anyone. At least at the moment, if you get sick in Europe, including Britain, you're covered by the NHS or some equivalent system. But in the United States, if you don't have health insurance or you don't have the right cover of health insurance, you're up shit creek without a paddle, where you end up having to sell your home, get a part-time job even though you're dying just to cover your treatment. People refusing ambulances because it's not covered by their network. It's not in their network, or they're afraid that they're not going to be able to afford that coverage on their insurance won't cover it or something like that. It's insane. And it should not be emulated in Britain. And unfortunately, you have the Tories who are, sliding it in under the table, convincing people, don't worry, it's still going to be free at the point of use. We're just going to rely on the private sector just to fill this capacity. The Tories are a bit more honest about it. They're saying, we're happy to use the private sector. The Labour Party, Wes Streeting, is a bit sort of, we're just going to rely on them just to resolve this problem, and then we'll go back to the public healthcare service. No, I don't trust him. Because once the private sector have the foot in the door, then they'll say, as I think it was Alistair had pointed out, or maybe it was Gareth who had pointed out earlier, or maybe it was Magic actually. Someone pointed out earlier how it was privatized in the 1980s. It began with cleaning facilities, catering facilities. Started off small. What's the point in paying, a wage to somebody to clean the hospital rooms, to clean the corridors? Just outsource it to a private company, you save money. You'll pay pretty much the same rate, but the private company will make a profit and the workers will be paid minimum wage or less. While before, you had somebody who was working for the NHS, they had a contract, they had a pension, and then they would have good working conditions. If they had sick leave, they weren't on a 0-hour contract or anything like that, and then when they finished the work, they retired and they had a pension. The bringing on the private sector with agency staff, you eliminate that. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. The reason why the US spends so much on healthcare is because it's poorly run, it's poorly regulated, it's a ragtag and propped up by Wall Street. FFS, yes. Like, you have a situation where insulin costs like 5 times or more in the US than it does in Canada. And it's actually the same insulin. Because in Canada, the health service is able to compete, is able to negotiate on price. Bernie Sanders was trying to bring in this law that the US healthcare service could negotiate on price, and it was struck down by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. They fought against it. They don't want the healthcare service providers negotiating on price. You have cases of people traveling across the border into Canada to buy medicine, and they risk jail time because it's considered smuggling. They could be arrested. If in some cases they are arrested. I don't know if they've been put in prison, but I imagine they have. Elderly people who can't afford to buy the medicine in the US are going to Canada on a bus, buying medicine in Canada and trying to bring it back across the border and being arrested and put in jail to save their lives. It's insane. It really pisses me off. This really pisses me off. Thanks, Gareth. Moving on. Moving swiftly on. And we're getting close to the end. So, as you probably know, Greenpeace had a little protest outside Rishi Sunak's, one of Rishi Sunak's houses, mansions. It's a pretty big house. Let me see if we have the video, if it loads. Sometimes
I think it is a proportionate response to...
This is the former
personal
head of...
stance. He chose that I, as Prime Minister, at a time to respond
Let me just see if
for
there's
there. But in fact, that there was nobody shows that I...
No, they don't show the whole house, but the house is pretty big. Greenpeace defends Rishi Sunak home protest as proportionate response to a disastrous decision. 5 people have been bailed by North Yorkshire Police after demonstration on a roof of the Prime Minister's Grade 2 listed home on Thursday. The campaigners used ladders and climbing rope to scale the property and drape it with a black oil fabric to protest against plans to grant more than 100 licenses for oil and gas extraction in the North Sea. Mr Sunak is currently on holiday with his wife and children, but Tory and Labour MPs criticised the targeting of the private... Why did the Labour Party do this? Why does the Labour... Can you... I've said this before. If Jeremy Corbyn was Prime Minister and somebody protested outside his house, do you think the Conservative MPs would be criticising this? If it was something that the Tories supported, if it was somebody complaining about ULEZ or something like that, do you think the Tories would be criticising somebody for protesting outside a group? I'm not talking about an individual. If it was an individual, they probably would criticise. But if it was a group, an organised group protesting outside Jeremy Corbyn's house, one of Jeremy Corbyn's houses, while Jeremy Corbyn was on holiday, do you think the Tories would be criticising this? Why did the Labour Party have to be like the Tories in these things? Why can't they say, yeah, actually this is the right thing? No, they can't, because they have to keep, the marginal seat people happy. it's always down to the marginal seat people, isn't it? The marginal seats are the tail wagging the dog. The hell with the rest of Britain. The hell with the United Kingdom. We have to keep a few, headbangers in a red wall happy on every occasion. Everything. When it comes to trans rights, when it comes to environmental issues, when it comes to Brexit, when it comes to, tax issues, when it comes to hungry children, we have to keep these people happy. It's getting annoying, to put it mildly. It's pathetic. The Labour Party just kowtowing to this fringe element. I understand the reason they do this, because of first past the post. They have to keep this marginal happy, because if they don't, then they're not going to win the next general election, or it's going to end up a hung parliament, and these people will be the ones who will decide. But Jesus Christ. Criticised for a private home while an ex-police chief branded it a major security breach. Was anyone harmed? No. It was an organisation called Greenpeace. It was not some sort of rogue... It wasn't some crazy person with a hatchet, okay? Then you could say, okay, there was a security breach. There was a concern here. Arma Ariba Hamid, co-executive director of Greenpeace, said the protest had been planned carefully and meticulously, and would not have gone ahead had the Prime Minister been at home. She told Prime Minister it was proportional response to a disastrous decision. And look, what is the problem with all the media coverage of this is that we're focusing on the protest and not on what they're protesting. No new oil contracts, no new oil licenses. That's what we should be focusing on. Why is Rishi Sunak giving licenses to these companies? Is it because of connections he has to these companies? Is it connections his family have to these companies? I don't know. That would be a good thing for Rishi Sunak to come clean about. What are your connections to the fossil fuel industry? Some journalists should do that. They should ask Rishi Sunak, what are your connections to the fossil fuel industry? Have you made money from them, directly or indirectly? Can you tell us about your investments? I think it's in the public interest. The public should know. They would want to know if there's a conflict of interest here, that you're making decisions to help companies that are going to help you. And if he dodges it, then I would say, as a journalist, I say, are you going to answer the question? And if he doesn't answer the question, then I would say, I'll put words in your mouth. You have a choice now. I'm going to put words in your mouth unless you want to come clean. And I'd never have an interview once again with him. But I'd say, like, if you're not going to, then we'll have to assume that you have some conflict of interest. We'll have to assume it, because you're not going to deny it. You have the choice now to deny it. You have the opportunity to deny it, to say, no, there's no connection. I have no connection with these oil companies. Don't have any investments with these oil companies. I'm doing it clearly for this reason or whatever. But he wouldn't do that. And unfortunately, the journalists wouldn't challenge him on that. They'd like, okay, let's move on to the next topic. Gareth, thank you so much for that. Wow, thank you so much. Very kind of you. Remember hearing about the NHS agency worker? He fell. He sliced his arm open. He got blood poisoning. 95% of his arm is now dead. His employer refused to pay up. He reluctantly sued the NHS instead and won more than £500,000. So the NHS paid, but not the private company. Because at the end it was the NHS that was responsible. But see, if this may not have happened if this had been an NHS worker. So there would have been proper safety measures in place, we would hope. There wouldn't be an economic incentive for the NHS not to have the proper mechanisms in place. So this worker wouldn't have ended up in this situation. But the fact that the company said, oh, it's nothing to do with us. And then I think you've hit on a very interesting point as well that I had never thought of, is that, you could try and take the NHS to court and you may have a better chance than taking the agency to court, because the agency can just say, well, we're declaring bankruptcy. We're closing down. You're frigged. There's nothing you can do. So it's a case of private companies will be able to avoid paying compensation where the NHS may not. But on this story, it's be interesting to know Rishi Sunak's connections to the fossil fuel industry. Guys, we're almost at the finish. Just want to cover two more stories. One is Donald Trump. Why are we still talking about Donald Trump?
Thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America.
No, it's a sad day for you. It's a happy day for America.
And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the
maybe he needs to clean his windows.
Broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left.
Perhaps Donald Trump forgets the DC that he left, unrecognisable as it was, boarded up with barricades, barbed wire and battalions on high alert after thousands of his followers stormed the Capitol and ransacked its sacred halls, all to upend the certification of Joe Biden as president on January the 6th, 2021. And it's for his role in that alleged criminal plot that Donald Trump was summoned back to Washington, D.C. yesterday. With grey clouds suitably hanging overhead, he cut a defiant yet solitary figure, no fist pumps today, as the wannabe next president descended the loftily named Trump Force One and made the short trip via long motorcade to a federal courthouse to be arrested and charged. Outside, the party was already in full swing. This is Washington, D.C., of course. People here remember how it felt on January the 6th, and they wanted Trump to feel and see their joy at prosecutors finally holding him to account.
Keep on moving! Keep on moving!
These fake news media, they're sick people. They're sick people.
Everybody knows it.
I did everything right. I did everything right. And they...
You gotta love the Americans. Stu, welcome. Congratulations on 3 months of being a member. BP and Infosys, that's the Rashid Sunak Prime Minister connection to the fossil fuel industries. Yes, Infosys and BM and British Petroleum. The Infosys won a contract for $1.5 billion this week, I think it was. And Infosys, of course, is owned by Rishi Sunak's father-in-law.
They indicted me, can you believe it?
That, in fact, was exactly what was happening inside, where court sketches showed the former president pleading not guilty to 4 separate criminal charges that he had conspired to allegedly spread his lies about election fraud, knowing they were false, to pressure state and federal officials, including his own vice president, to throw out votes for Joe Biden and install him as president instead. And he's pled not guilty. Do you think he's not guilty?
No, I think he's guilty as sin.
Back outside, the polarised America that Donald Trump left behind was on full display and full volume.
These are criminals. They have the
Trump
Trump for king. Trump for king.
for king. I thought the US got rid of kings some time ago.
But based on what I've seen so far, I do think he's guilty of a lot of very serious crimes against our democracy.
Lock him up! Lock him up!
What he's accused of doing here is probably one of the most serious crimes to have taken place in this country ever, allegedly.
If all politicians were indicted for everything they did, that would probably be also the worst in American history. If we indict.
This is an interesting response from the pro Trump people. It's like, well, if we locked up everyone, then so would you support politicians being locked up for corruption and for breaking the law? Which is it? Do you because they say, well, Trump is innocent, he shouldn't be locked up. But if others have done his things, they should be locked up as well. But which is it? You want him locked up or you don't? You want corrupt politicians and presidents to be put in jail or not?
Indict one, we should indict them all.
And it seems that we're at a point where our justice system doesn't seem to matter, at least to half America and to a lot of members of Congress and Republicans. They don't seem to care.
So you're a young person who voted for Trump in 2020?
I did.
Do you think he won the election?
No, I mean, he didn't.
You saying he must have known he lost, you would still vote for him again?
Over Biden, for sure.
How do you explain?
Why? I really don't understand this support for... Like, what has he done for you? I never understood this. I always think you should vote for politicians that do something for you. At least you. Like, if you're a multimillionaire, I can understand why you would vote Republican, because they'll lower your taxes. But you see so many ordinary people be like, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump. Why? Because I like him. It's like, what does he do for the country? He does a lot of things for himself. What does he do for you? Nothing. Really, honestly, I don't understand this. I know it's a cult of personality, but I can't understand this. It's like Farage as well. These people who are protesting, going insane, calling in radio stations to show their support for Nigel Farage because he lost his exclusive bank account. These are people who probably can't feed themselves, who are queuing at a food bank, writing on Twitter how much they support Nigel Farage. Watching from the hike, Mourne Mountains, County Down. Hey, Snub, great to have you on. Thank you so much for that super chat.
The grit that he has on the party. Even young people with their whole future ahead of them, they are wanting to go back to him.
There is a faction, about a third of it, who are always Trump voters. They will walk through a wall of flame for Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump has an enormous lead in the polls. And yes, we are facing a completely unprecedented situation. There's so much that's going to occur between now and the nomination next summer. We'll be very, very hard pressed to make any certain predictions about how this whole thing is going to turn out.
I have a feeling that Trump will be nominated. He will win the nomination. I don't know. I haven't been following US politics, but I have this terrible feeling, and the gut feeling, that Trump will win the nomination, even if he's in prison. And I don't know, I don't think he's going to go to prison, but I think even if he were to go to prison, he would still win the nomination, because there's nobody within the party. He still has this cult of personality within the party that, yeah, DeSantis is running against him, but DeSantis is crashing and burning. There's no one really who has the same clout as he does. Like, this is not 2016. He was president. It's very difficult for somebody to fill those shoes. Because normally a president, when they lose, they go away. Trump didn't do that. Brad, thank you so much for those 2 super chats. Thank you so much for that, for both of those. A Trump supporter dies and goes to heaven. God, you lived a good life, and I'll grant you a completely honest answer to the question you have. Trumper, who really won the 2020 election? God, Biden in a fair election. Trumper, this goes even higher than I thought. Even God is corrupt. Even God is on the take. It's above him as well. That's a good one. Thanks so much, Brad.
All the while, his competitors are getting no airtime at all.
He's like this big figure that blots out the sun, and none of his competitors are going to be able to get enough sunlight to flower and bloom.
And so reporters scurry across.
And this is the problem. The media love Donald Trump. The media love him because he drives traffic to their websites. He results in clicks and likes on social media. And this is what's going to happen. When Donald Trump blows his nose, the media love it. They're covered in the snot and they love it. It's a way for them to make money. And they're hoping that Donald Trump runs, because the rest is just crap. Gareth, once again, thanks so much for that super chat. Donald Trump DC is not how I left it. There's fewer corpses and more sweat resistant hair dye. I'm looking at Rudy get out of jail free. Thanks, Gareth. Oh yes. Woods by me, good night. I hope to see you next Tuesday. We're almost at the end, guys, so just to cover one final story here from Ukraine, and then we'll close for tonight.
Welcome back. Ukraine claims that it has damaged a Russian warship after a naval drone attack last night. Kyiv refuted Russian claims that all its drones were destroyed, claiming that damage caused to landing ship Olenogorski Gorinak means that it can no longer conduct its combat missions. Well, our military analyst Sean Bell is with us in the studio now. Hi, Sean. Talk us through what we know about this drone attack.
Yeah, the early hours of the morning, the Russian defence ministers claimed that they've repelled a Ukrainian maritime drone attack like this. This is the sort of thing that the Ukrainians use. The Russian claims they destroyed 2 of these at sea, just off the port of Novorossiysk, which is the biggest Russian naval seaport on the Black Sea. What's interesting, the Ukrainians, though, normally don't claim any credit for this, but they have turned around and said, no, we were responsible for this, and they claim that the ship was actually damaged. Now roll the clock forward to this morning, and there's significant video footage and some stills showing the Olenogorski Gorinak, the ship that was hit, listing heavily to port. If you look at the front of the deck near yours, it's very clearly tilting, and it's being dragged back into port. So it's evidently suffered some damage. And the Ukrainian maritime drones, they've increased the number of attacks that they've been doing over the course of the war. This footage that emerged, that Ukrainians have released, claims to be of attacking the ship last night. And you look at the profile, for the experts, this is the same ship. They're pretty high-tech drones. They're quite stealthy. They generally use them to attack at night when the Russians are most vulnerable. They've been using them around Crimea and particularly the port of Sevastopol as well. Normally the challenge is that when these things happen at sea, there's no independent coverage, so we can't tell. And the Russians always deny. On this occasion, it does look like the Ukrainians were successful.
Interesting.
And look, and these drones cost a few $1,000s. Compared to millions of dollars for these ships. And of course, this ship didn't sink. It'll be dragged into port, it'll be repaired, but it's out of action and it's expensive. It's really bloody expensive to repair these battleships. Well, not battleship, but these warships. You know, this is a massive victory. And if they're able to conduct more strikes like this, it's going to potentially put the Russian fleet in the area in serious trouble. Gareth, thank you so much for that super chat, Max. I hope to see you next Tuesday. That's what I say about Donald Trump on a regular basis. Well said, Gareth. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to say thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much for the super chats, especially Gareth. Thank you so much, Gareth, for all of your super chats. Thanks to everyone who has smashed the like button, and thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. before we finish, we have our one for the road, so I'm going to bring that up. Remember to smash the like button on your way out, and if I don't see you, well, if I don't see you over the weekend, I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. But here we go.
This government is the single biggest challenge facing this country at the moment. With this government, what you buy is more expensive and what you save is worth less. And in the end, this government puts your jobs and livelihoods at risk. But while this government has got worse since I became Prime Minister, which is incredible when you think about where I started from, dragging it out remains my top priority for this year and next year. Because you never know, something might come up to save this government. We know this government is causing people distress and anxiety, but the alternative is much worse. Without decisive action to retain this government, people who once stood with Jeremy Corbyn could get into power, and living standards might increase in the long run. That cannot be allowed to happen. I believe that we can't make a positive case to retain this government, and because of that, I need to make some difficult decisions. Decisions like accusing Labour of being funded by Just Stop Oil, and loving criminal gangs, and hating women. Tough decisions like granting hundreds of new gas and oil licences, because this government believes that spoiling the past isn't enough if you can't also ruin the future. Strong choices like shoving migrants into floating fire traps, because we know that that's something that some people want from this government. Because this government won't take lectures from anyone, which is why we're shutting down several degree courses. So look, I know a lot of brain owners will be worried about this government, but why not take your mind off things by delivering a few takeaways or playing chess outside, or even popping to Disneyland. But don't go there by private jet, that's only for journeys you could have done by train. Because I have a plan for this government, and that's to stay in government regardless of the pain you're feeling. There's still a long way to go, but we're sticking to the plan, because the plan is working, even if I'm not.
Wonderful, wonderful as always. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Take care and good night. Good night.